too well. Nevertheless, we're being dragged in that direction. However, a universal system of money, that's what the powers that be, all the little secret meetings going on, that's what the powers that be are really negotiating on right now, is when the dollar dies, what is the new system going to look like? And B, we have to get rid of cash. We have to prevent people from dissenting, and we have to force them into going along with whatever it is we want. We have to know what they're doing, and to do that, we have to get rid of cash. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, worldwide freedom of immigration. In order to dissolve national sentiments, belief in your own country versus the culture of another, we have to blur that line, and the only way to do that is to have all sorts of groups of people moving back and forth. Now, he was talking about this in 1942. Next one, a democratically controlled international bank. We're moving toward that. After the next crisis, I think if you take the universal system of money and the democratically controlled international bank, you will see these things lock into place in a whole new way when that next big rumble comes that I've been predicting here on the show. It's not quite on our doorsteps yet, but it is headed our way. And even distribution of the world's natural wealth. Everybody is on that bandwagon. Now, they're talking about the natural wealth, but you need to understand underlying that is always socialism, that everybody should have equal access. Well, the goal under capitalism would be to make it feasible by creating viable economic systems in all these countries. But when you talk to the socialists, it's a whole different deal. And isn't that what we're hearing all the time? Distribution of wealth, repayment of that, moving these things over here, forcing those people to pay over there. That's what it's all about. And the churches had to be brought into all of this. That's what the National Council of Churches was all about, which, by the way, never saw a communist. It never liked. Always were willing to look the other way about persecution and rather move them forward in that area. So this is the merger that's going on right now. And as always, as has always been, for some reason, churches, pastors, clergymen, priests are all incredibly gullible and unwilling to, I guess it's because they're just busy in the walls of their own churches. And so most of them sign on. About 80% of the pastors in Germany Heil Hitler sooner or later. It was only 20% that said, oh, this is not good. But when we realize that that's what John Foster Dulles, later Secretary of State, about 10 years later in the Eisenhower administration, with the Federal Council of Churches, was already proposing. And, of course, we're hearing a lot of the same stuff from Pope Francis today, aren't we? You can just read through this stuff. I could take hours just reading this material. A lot of it's been put together by Dr. Dennis Cuddy or Barrett Chose and a number of other different sources. UNESCO, United Nations organization, its purpose and its philosophy, written by Sir Julian Huxley. That was back in 1948. It declared, quote, the general philosophy of UNESCO should be a scientific world humanism, global in extent and evolutionary in background. In its education program, it can stress the ultimate need for world political unity, read a global government, and familiarize all peoples with the implications of the transfer of full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization. Political unification in some sort of world government will be required. And he talks about the media in another section. He says, task for the media division of UNESCO will be to promote the growth of a common outlook shared by all nations and cultures to help the emergence of a single world culture. It also says, even though it is quite true that any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care, and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable. We're going to reshape what people think. What is it President Obama was always talking about? Transformation. When people are talking about transformation, you have to ask, why should we be transformed? Isn't it working too well right now? Isn't it working so well? And if you're going to transform us, to what will we be transformed? See, that's where it gets blurry. We have a few anecdotes, but those are the immediate issues that are never the issue. They're not telling you what the real destination is. Okay, we're going to do more and more on that. I think we're going to do a whole show on a lot of this next week. I've just decided that because it's time we zoom out and look at what the global elites are all doing. You have to laugh at it sometimes when people say, oh, Bilderbergers, they're planning blah, blah, blah. Somebody will jump up and say, oh, conspiracy theory. Whew, conspiracy theory. Well, yeah, but I mean, these are world leaders. They're meeting under tight security, totally in secret. Are they going there to play poker? I don't think so. What they're doing is they're trying to discuss things out of the view of public limelight so they can actually discuss them candidly and sometimes disagree. There are fights that go on there sometimes without the media and the press and all of the pundits and what are called the chattering classes, of which I guess I'm one, to be able to comment on it. That's why they do that. And you'll notice that they meet and then all of a sudden certain policies come about. So there is a global elite, and they are steering us to a destination which, if you take time to read some of the stuff they're writing, is pretty clear when you begin to put the newspeak together. When challenged on it in public, that's the only time they'll deny it. Other than that, they like to brag about it. Anyway, let's do some other news stories here before we wrap up on Section 6 today. We have talked about on this program, and will probably do so in the future, we have discussed how politicized much of the military has become. Whistleblowers are alleging that senior officers deliberately misrepresented the war on ISIS as going well and punishing those analysts who were dissenting. Carolyn Stewart had previously accused her superiors of changing reports on the Islamic State to fit the official White House line that the war against the self-proclaimed caliphate is being won. This is according to a report in the Daily Beast. Officially, she was transferred for cursing, but last Wednesday she brought her case before a Department of Defense appeals court against her civilian superior, Gregory Rickman, and the court was attempting to determine whether Stewart's swearing, which allegedly took place on 2 occasions, created a hostile work environment and therefore merited the transfer. The problem is, if cursing were really a fireable or transferable offense in the military, you have to think about it. Every soldier, sailor, Marine, and Defense Department civilian would have to be sent home. What's happening is that more than 50 intelligence analysts working for CENTCOM have signed on to similar complaints such as this after a leading Iraq analyst identified as Gregory Hooker filed a complaint against his superiors in September 2015. This was a thing reported by the New York Times.